Cool. So before we get going, I think most people have done it anyway now, but just so it's easier to hear the girls when they get talking, if you just stick yourself on mute, because the Zoom just picks up any little bits of noise and takes the microphone off the person talking. So stick yourself on mute. If you've got a question or anything you want to pop out with, then obviously unmute yourself and just shout out. And the girls will answer whatever questions you've got. So a little bit of background then. Obviously, you're all probably sick of my voice and seeing my face. The two ladies that we've got here in the matching peach tops, that's the blonde herb. Hannah's gone blonder than what last time I saw her. Laura, give us a wave. And then we've got Hannah, who's on my left. I'm not sure if it's the left for everyone else. So I met Laura. When was it, Laura? It must have been January.
Yeah, strength and depth are 2 years. Not last year, the year before.
Yeah. So it's probably 2 years ago-ish when we actually met at European Championships.
We did.
When you begged me to come along and help coach at Strength and Depth. You did beg. So Laura just reached out and was just after coming and working with our coaches and our athletes to go into Strength and Depth. I needed a hand. And we just got chatting that weekend, and Laura let me know kind of what she does as a coach and for a job, and what her passion is. And many conversations led us to the point where we needed to get a lot of information and education across to the female coaches and athletes that are under JST Compete, just to spread the word and spread the knowledge about the female body and how to use the body to train and go with the body rather than go against it. So it was about a year ago, maybe a little bit longer, where we actually did a live group, like a similar thing to this, but in the Facebook group, where Laura spoke about a lot of information and educated a lot of the girls and boys on the program. And we've continued to work together with other athletes since then. And we just thought we've had a good new intake of new athletes and girls, and just a good time to educate them again, and even just refresh some memories from the girls and guys that were involved in it last time. So Laura had since joined up with Hannah, and they've created Flow Females, which if you follow them on Facebook, and Instagram, there's loads and loads of good posts there, information and education. So make sure you give them a little follow after this call as well. All right. I'll hand it over to the two girls, and I'll take a back seat. And if you need me, then just give us a shout out. All right.
Get in the back seat there, Steve. That's where you belong.
Will do.
Are you joking? Hey everyone. Yes, I'm Laura, and thanks for that intro, Steve. It's been, since we last spoke, so much has evolved, and yes, I have teamed up with this legend on my right, Hannah, and we have created Flow Females Complete Performance, and it's something we've been embedded in and fully invested in for 6 years now, and it's really in its infancy at the moment. It is a new way of thinking. It's a shift in perspective that we have observed and felt is needed in this industry. For females to excel in their health first and foremost, and also performance. Now, we are continuing to build a very unique message here. We have our own unique style, which I'm sure as we flow through this, you will kind of, you'll be able to link into and feel. But if you've any questions, if you don't understand anything, please pop yourself off mute, ask all the questions that you wish, because we are here today to serve you, obviously to educate you on the female physiology, but what do you want to know? What do you feel like you need to know? Okay? Essentially, our coaching philosophy at Flow Females Complete Performance is embedded in first understanding the female physiology, right? Now, once you understand the female physiology, then you can apply. But we live in a society that wants instant gratification, wants instant results. all, we are bombarded constantly with diet trends and the next best training program and things like this, and it's all application, and it completely what's the word I'm looking for, it oversteps or overleaps the understanding. The way I like look at it, I love an analogy. I know Steve says this as well, like both myself and Hannah love analogies, but it's really like when you're learning to ride a bike and you first of all have the stabilizers on the bike, right? That's your foundation. That's your knowledge aspect of all of this. It's the stabilizers that will help you actually initially gain better position on the bike, like move more efficiently, all of those things, feel what's going on in the body. Without those stabilizers, you're only getting on the bike, you're falling off every single time, okay? So we want to give you those stabilizers, first of all, that will help you later on apply. So right now it's not about the application, it's about the understanding. We're going to be taking a look at the female reproductive hormones. So we've got estrogen and progesterone. I'm sure that those are hormones that you have heard of before. I know there's a lot of people here that has been in our flow school already. So estrogen and progesterone are the reproductive hormones, and they create a stream of effects in our system, okay? Now, they don't only affect the reproductive system, because they travel in the blood, they affect cardiovascular health, bone health, brain health, how we metabolize our fuel, all of these things. So to overlook the fact that they just work the reproductive system is quite, what's the word I'm looking for here? It's quite detrimental to what you may experience a little bit later on, okay? If you're just focused, say for example, you don't want to become fertile, okay? So therefore you shut down your reproductive system with hormonal contraceptives. This straight away is making the waters super muddy, okay? So the cardiovascular health, bone health, how you metabolize your food, all of these things, how you respond to your training, yeah? So just something just to think about at the moment. The reason that we believe in everything that we do is because we have actively experienced so many of the health repercussions that we will go on to talk about today due to a lack of context surrounding our female physiology. So that's what we're going to create for you right now. We're going to create some context. So I'm going to hand you over to Hannah, who's going to give a little bit of her backstory, give you a little bit more context to maybe what you as a female are experiencing yourself, or maybe as a male, what you the conversations that you may have had with a female, or maybe what you observe what a female is experiencing. Maybe you have not yet had those conversations, but you've observed something. So hopefully this context will give you more awareness. Hannah, do you want to?
Yeah, let's go for it. Thanks, Ledge. Awesome little intro there. My little powerful little pineapple sat next to me. So yeah, guys, like, it's so nice to meet you all, and thank you so much for coming today. I just kind of wanted to lead on from where Laura's left off there and just talk about a little bit about our own experiences, because those collaborative conversations that we had and how we resonated with each other and the experiences we had as athletes and coaches within the someone just popped up there, within the health and fitness industry, are what has essentially led to us creating this unique way of working. So let's go back to perhaps a stage which you might relate to. Perhaps you might have felt some of these things, or you might be experiencing them now. I'm just going to chat through a little bit about my story and where it all started. So I competed within the sport of fitness, but all my life kind of within sport, and just really found CrossFit as it started to emerge into the UK. So I originally started training with a group of male PTs with a military affiliate. Over time, just slowly started like ramping up my training load and volume. I got to a stage of where I was training hard 1 to 2 times a day for around 5 to 6 days a week. And I was also on the side of that, thinking about the lifestyle aspect. I was coaching a business and caring for my 2 kids as well. And I was very much caught up in this mentality that to compete and better my performance, I needed to be going hard in my training sessions and continuously pushing forward. And everyone around me was doing the same. And I think underneath it, there was this undercurrent of body image, which meant that I was well within the realms of low energy availability for what my lifestyle was, or what I was asking of myself to do. So myself and Laura actually kind of resonated with each other, because we both suffered from something called hypothalamic amenorrhea, which is when you have complete loss of the menstrual cycle. And at the time, I didn't actually really think that this was of any significance. And I vividly remember thinking that it was easier not to deal with any symptoms anyway. And I laughed about the fact I didn't have a period and it was something I didn't have to deal with every month. And it's clear to me now that, looking back, nobody once asked me about my period health as a female athlete, or how I actually felt around my training. And I actually, from kind of what I understand now, and like what Laura and I have brought to the surface, is that this way of training that we're talking about, depending on what the individual lifestyle of the person is, can compromise health and performance as a female. And really, it's just about thinking about things very differently, and perhaps talking now about where we were submerged and what the differences are now, in terms of this new wave of thinking around things, and how you can better your health and performance, and definitely train from this place of hormonal vitality over the fighting against your system. So it's really just wanted to kind of tap into where we've come from as individuals, and I think Laura's going to share a little bit about where she's come from with it as well, because I think it's really important to kind of share those deep-rooted things that can quite often cause us to get to these places of feeling stagnant in our training, or not feeling like we're getting as far as we perhaps should be, considering how hard that we're training, or that we feel like we're doing everything that we can, but still something's not working quite right for us. Laura, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, like, thanks for sharing that, Wilson. And I'm just going to pick up off the back of that and just identify that our backstories are so important. That's what we are a byproduct of. When we don't have the awareness around certain aspects, we're just going to create a cycle of change that we keep relapsing within. So for example, if I'm constantly looking at my training and my nutrition and my lifestyle and my recovery from a place of what I've always done, well, I'm always going to get those same results. And for me, I was trying everything within my power to perform better. I wasn't doing everything in my power to become healthier, because I didn't understand, or I was more concerned about what Hannah explained, the body composition aspect. I was more concerned about the performance aspect. I wasn't concerned so much about my health, because I thought what I was doing was actually making me healthy. So whenever I hit my stage of chronic exhaustion about 4 years ago, I remember hopping on the rower, and I was about to do, likewise, Hannah, I was training 3 times a day, 6 days a week. I remember hopping on the rower and went to pull for a 250 meter just warm up row. And I thought I was going to take a heart attack, like my chest. I thought that was it there and then, that I was a goner. And I remember thinking, I have had all these subclinical symptoms, like digestive issues, low energy levels, mood fluctuations that were crazy, cravings, like low sex drive, all of those things. And I ignored them for so long. And it wasn't until I became exhausted that I had to step back and acknowledge, where did this all go wrong? And what underpinned it for me was a conversation with my doctor, who actually told me that things were normal when I explained that I hadn't had an 8-month cycle, which was just crazy. But not to put the medical professional side of things down, because myself and Hannah always recommend people to go and speak with a medical professional. We're not endocrinologists, we're not doctors, we are female health and performance specialists, so we can find solutions for you before you get to that stage of exhaustion, okay? But off the back of that conversation, I wasn't happy with the conversation that I had, or the way that it ended, and I decided to do the research and started to figure out that I didn't have my menstrual cycle, and maybe if I focused on my health from a menstrual cycle perspective, I may find my way back to training the way I used to train, to being able to have the energy I used to have, because I once had that, now I didn't. When I focused on my menstrual health, things didn't just shift a little bit, it shifted everything in my life, everything. From training to recovery, to my nutrition, to how I eat, what I eat, the way I live my life, everything. And that one like focus, which was, okay, I'm gonna try and get my menstrual cycle back. Once I get that back, I'm gonna do all the things surrounding that got that back, and I'm gonna attach it to my training, to my nutrition, my fueling. And this is where Flow Females, the conversations that we've had have stemmed from. It's our real life experiences, followed by the research we've dived into. So maybe there's something within that you can resonate with. You may be experiencing something now subclinically that you're not aware of. As we flow through this evening, hopefully you will find some advice that you can take away with you, and maybe start to gain further knowledge on. But Hannah, what's your next little flow step you want to go into?
Little flow step. I think it's that point, isn't it, that often, women are included in research, but perhaps in certain particular phases of cycle, or OCPs or oral contraceptive pills are used as control. And there's kind of a lot of general assumptions that have come out in scientific research, which really does underpin a hell of a lot of those kind of training and nutrition and recovery guidelines that are kind of pumped out into yet really, I lost my train of thought there when I heard that music. So really those kind of general assumptions are hindering and harming female menstrual health, and as a result of that, many women are struggling through life or failing to reach their true athletic potential, performance levels, and peak body composition as a result. And we're kind of turning things on their head a little bit and bringing all of that research that now is starting to kind of be done on the female physiology to the surface, and building systems to help females better understand themselves and to align their training and their recovery and nutrition with their female physiology, so that you can actually stop fighting it, start flowing with it, and potentially find this power within you which you perhaps haven't discovered before. And it's quite amazing, actually. But we're just going to chat through a little bit about the menstrual vitality side of things, and looking into almost like an avatar, really, from a female health story perspective, because we're often contacted by women and active females who say things like, and let's just kind of take a moment to kind of really feel this as well, do these things kind of resonate with you? That perhaps you've had irregular or non-existent periods and you just can't understand why, or you have you're tracking your cycle sometimes but not all the time. Perhaps that non-existent period or irregular period you're not actually bothered about that much, because you feel like it's holding you back from training anyway. Sometimes you might be thinking about taking that hormonal contraceptive to stop your periods so that you can train more and without that monthly PMS. Or you're exercising 5 times a week, you're on a really healthy diet, but you can't understand why your period's gone all over the show. And perhaps just one last point as well, struggling to decrease the intensity of your sessions because you feel that you won't make any progress or lose the progress that you've already made. And these are points I've given as examples because these are things that we're being spoken to about on the daily. Women are reaching out to us and asking these kind of questions, saying, these are the experiences we're having, help me. And I think it's just those things can really kind of give an insight into what's going on underneath the surface, because it's so easy to hide it. You can't see that stuff going on, so therefore it's very easy to kind of mask over it and go, it's not important, it doesn't matter. But actually, it does matter, and we as coaches within this field feel that we can give so much help and support to those females that are struggling with those symptoms to be able to better work with their body. So Ledge, what's your thoughts? Like, where do you want to kind of flow from there off the back of kind of giving those examples?
Well, what I like, we discussed this, and what we wanted to input at this point is actually open the floor for some insight and questions so far, because we feel that by pressing pause right now, this is something that this is something that is part of Flow Females. We like to create space and take space, and it's so damn important. And I think right now it's important to take some space, maybe have a little bit of a flow down yourself, and have a little just give us some feedback, ask some questions, and we can take it from there. What's happening internally rather than externally? Or from a male perspective, is there anything from a coaching side of things that you're currently struggling with, or maybe there's a conversation that you feel like you should be having but you're not having? Anything like that. Like, we would love you all to get involved. Like, the collaborative conversation is what helps everyone. It's like okay for us to sit here and talk about everything, but if it's not going in or you're not relating to it, we want to be able to help that. Is there anything in the chat box?
I'm just having a little look. Sammy says he's muted his mic. She says, here we go, we've got one here from Sam. Thank you so much, lovely. That's awesome. The question is, I take the oral contraceptive for endometriosis, which has stopped my period. What impact might this be having on my training? So, awesome question. Do you want to flow into that one?
Yeah, the endometriosis is, for anyone that doesn't know, it's a condition. It's quite an inflammatory condition that is in the pelvic region for the female, and it is extremely painful. It's extremely uncomfortable. However, some females may not experience that pain. My question on the back end of that would be, how was that diagnosed? And is the reason you're taking the oral contraceptive purely for the condition of endometriosis? Have you had the conversations with your doctor surrounding what it is that you do on a daily basis, whether it be from a training, nutrition, lifestyle perspective? Is this something that you have even considered yourself? Has it been something that maybe from a young age was diagnosed? And we know that when from a menarche, so when a female takes her period for the first time, it takes up to 5-7 years for a cycle to fully mature. So if we intervene with hormonal contraceptives quite early on in the stage of menarche, when you first get your bleed, you can actually create, we call this our muddy waters, where things can start to arise later on in life. And it's that element of struggle that we begin to face from a menstrual dysfunction perspective.
I thought that might be like a really cool point, based on what you've just kind of chatted about there, to bring up the hormonal lifespan side of things, and show all of you exactly what does go on underneath the surface in terms of hormonal, when we talk about the hormonal lifespan, which you might well have kind of seen on some of our posts, but Laura's just going to bring this up. So here we are. We have the hormonal lifespan in front of us, and I'm just going to flow through and tell you exactly what that is. So basically, we've drawn this little diagram here just to kind of help you simply understand what goes on across the female, in the female system, across your life, so to speak. So there's changes which require a different approach from the recovery, training, and nutrition perspective as we flow across that hormonal lifespan. So first of all, I'm just going to give you a really simple breakdown. When you can see this like little black marker right on the left-hand side over here, that's our menarche. This is what Elsie was just tapping into. So that is actually when we start to mature with our hormones. This is when periods start to occur. We then flow into, and like Elsie was saying, that can take up to 5 years for maturation for that to actually happen, for our cycles to become more cyclical. So you can see here, as we go into our reproductive years, that those peaks and troughs of our hormones, the estrogen and the progesterone, they go up and down across our monthly cycle, and these are our periods, and they happen, or for a healthy female, should happen on a regular basis. We then hit the perimenopausal phase, which is the next black marker up here, where our hormones start to perturb quite drastically. So this is when the estrogen and progesterone production starts to decline within our female system, and FSH, LH will start, so our follicle stimulating hormone and our luteinizing hormone will rise to try and stimulate the production of estrogen and progesterone, and therefore they go a little bit awry here, like you can see from that little graph. So this is our perimenopausal phase, which can be quite confusing time, can be quite frustrating for many females, but what hasn't been necessarily guided as to how we can flow through that stage feeling less of those symptoms that you're going to be feeling. We're then going to go into here, the last little phase there, our menopause, when the periods actually cease, and we go into the postmenopausal phase. So you can see that over our reproductive phase of life, the little point up here can also bring synthetic hormones into the mix. So with the use of contraceptives, and there are an awful lot of challenges that can bring. And there was that question, Sam, that you were kind of asking about what occurs when you take that hormonal contraceptive. And you know, this is something that we have a hell of a lot of conversation about, and quite often it's you know, it's the most prescribed drug in America, and it often, you know, it's been being given to females, and just like from a personal perspective as well, like it can be handed out to like 14, 15, 16-year-olds without really the explanation of what it's doing to your female system. And from the education kind of standpoint of females understanding their system, it's not happening in schools. So we're getting to this point where we start to exercise and do these things with our nutrition because it's pumped out through the industry, yet nothing's really been shared and supported from a different perspective. So that's what we're here to do. Did you want to tap into a little bit then about the cycle, Elsie, at this point? That might be quite...
Yeah, that'd be beneficial. Hold on here. So if we move on to, not that one, this one, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Right, team, can everyone see this little diagram, power up and flow down? Yeah? Wilson, can you see that, just so I know that?
I can see it.
Right, team, so this is your typical 28-day cycle that you will see, read, hear. And what we need to be mindful of is that a 28-day cycle is quite a unicorn cycle, I like to call it. It's quite rare, actually. Research has shown that anything between 21 right up to 40 days is what the majority of women will experience. Okay, now again, being mindful that this is an individualized approach. So when you look at this may apply to you at present, it may not apply to you at all from a 28-day perspective, but the anabolic and catabolic states of the sex hormones will apply if your hormonal cycle is fully functioning. Okay, so let's take a look at the power up phase. So the reason we call it the power up phase is because the most dominant sex hormone in the follicular phase and the power up phase is estrogen. Okay, so estrogen is anabolic in state. That means it builds the body up. Okay, so like I said before, how the sex hormones not only affect fertility in the reproductive system, they affect cardiovascular health, brain health, how we respond to training, our muscle enzyme activity, all of those things. So in the follicular phase, our bodies are very similar to the male physiology. Okay, so quite similar because we've got estrogen and testosterone as we peak towards ovulation here. Okay, so what I want you to be mindful of is the yellow line is estrogen. Estrogen is triphasic in essence. So what will happen is day 1, 2, 3, that is the bleed. That's the actual menstruation period right here. It can extend days 4, 5, 6. Again, individual dependent. Okay, so very important that you track your cycle for females and that they are having these conversations with other females and male coaches. Okay, so we then look at those lines. They're quite suppressed, they're quite dormant, and that's what happens when we bleed. So estrogen and progesterone are quite flatlined, okay? As we rise through the follicular phase, we need to be aware that the body actually, from a reproductive perspective, is preparing the uterus lining, it's growing and maturing this follicle, this egg, to actually prep it for pregnancy in the luteal phase. So that's exactly what's happening from a reproductive perspective, okay? Whilst from an overall health perspective, we are getting benefits from serotonin in our brain. We're getting benefits from dopamine. So this is where we feel better, we feel stronger, okay? So all of those elements are happening in this power up follicular phase, okay? We then move through the cycle and we take a little look at the fact estrogen starts to drop off as we come towards day 21. It'll slightly peak and then it will drop off towards menstruation again. So that's the triphasic nature of estrogen, okay? Then we move to the flow down phase. Hannah, I'm going to hand you over the flow down phase if you want to pick up on that.
Yeah, let's go for it. So flow down, these are our little trademarks, so to speak. So you might hear us talking about this power up and flow down fairly frequently. We refer back to it a lot of the time. But what Laura already said is that we really do have to understand that that ovulation might not happen at 14 days. It might not be a 28-day cycle. So as we go into this flow down phase, which on that unicorn cycle of 28 days, could be from day 14 to day 28. So you'll see that there's a natural fall in the estrogen and you have the progesterone starting to rise. Now, this is really important because during that flow down phase, progesterone is catabolic in nature, meaning that it breaks the body down. So very much that mirrored image that you saw in the power up phase with the anabolic, this is a catabolic state that we're now in. So it really does start to rise. You'll see a peak in the estrogen mid luteal phase as well, as they both start to tail off, and the reduction of those hormones within our system, the decline of the wave, then almost signals to the body that it's time to shed that uterine lining and start the period again. So that is in essence a very kind of simplistic way to kind of think about a female cycle and how you can split the two phases of a cycle to best benefit. But what I think is really, really key is just to remember that a blanket approach in terms of the way that you train, the nutritional alterations that you might make, and the recovery practices that you apply as an individual female are going to look very, very different from female to female. So we always suggest that your gold standard is that you look for ovulation and you track your cycle for a minimum of 3 months. So if you have a female client, if you're a male coach, or if you are a female not really kind of knowing where you're at, or if you're experiencing problems, we still suggest that for a minimum of 3 months you're tracking to see, especially if you're not having any your periods like MIA, missing in action, so to speak. If you're not experiencing those cycles because you don't have a period, that you're actually tracking any kind of feelings within your body as well, and going to seek some kind of medical attention for that, because having a period is not okay. And I think this is something that from here we're going to kind of tap into.
I just want to like shake things up a little bit to
yes,
I just wanted to put a little pointer in there that we were talking about ovulation at present and how that is our gold standard from a health perspective. When you ovulate, you get your byproduct of ovulation is these hormones, estrogen and progesterone. Estrogen and progesterone are what we need to build the body up, to break the body down, rebuild the body up, and so on. And obviously to be fertile, to keep our bones healthy, all of those things I discussed a little bit earlier. However, there are a lot of females out there who may bleed each month. It may not be at the same time, but they may bleed each month. And when they track ovulation around that day 14, 15, 16 period, they may not ovulate. So if they use an ovulation protector kit, if they use pee sticks, things like that, and they don't get any feedback or anything from a body temp thermometer as well, which is a way of testing for ovulation once temperature rises, because in this luteal phase, another little relationship that progesterone has with being a catabolic state is it's thermogenic in nature. And what that means is our core temperature naturally increases. We are much warmer in this phase, and that's as a byproduct of ovulation actually occurring. So that's how we get some feedback that ovulation is actually happening. I have worked with clients in the past who have identified having a cycle but not identifying having ovulation. So as a result of that, we are not able to distinguish effectively or accurately where their phases actually lie. And that's really important to be aware of. So if you've got an athlete who is telling you that they are an active female, that they are bleeding each month, but they don't show you an ovulation, they don't give you ovulation feedback, well then you're basically blanket approaching training on top of a 2-week on, a 2-week off block, which actually you may not be gaining true potential from that female, because they might have a 3-week stage where they can power up. So therefore you are going in and you're intervening with them making potential and progress in an anabolic state. Does that make, can you like Legend, what's your thoughts on that?
I'm just reading some of the comments. I think it's quite interesting. Carry on what she said. Joined in late. Just reading some of the comments. So after his work, functioning regular 30 to 35 day
Just
period.
looking at some questions, team.
Sorry, it's can you hear me?
Yes.
I get confused when you call Hannah Legend. I think you're talking to me.
Yeah, he does.
Right. Say I call you Serene.
Yeah, so that's what we're getting round to now, is something that the point that I really wanted to get across to the girls that are following one of our competition programs, where the program isn't necessarily focused around their individual like ovulation time and their period, and what I wanted to make sure that they got out of this was one, to understand then how they can use some of the self-regulation stuff that we put in our program based off where they know they are in their period, so that they can drop the intensity, they can drop the volume, or they can ramp up the intensity, ramp up the volume, depending on what phase that they're in. And then two, just to get some more feedback and maybe also some suggestions from the girls if there's anything that we could do further on those programs that would maybe help that process of trying to figure things out, maybe make it a bit more a bit easier to follow, so we can kind of help them out in that sense. But I'm sure you girls are going to touch on that from there. But if there's anything where you need me to relate back to training in terms of like how their program might flow, then give us a shout.
Cool. Yeah, like I was just reading some of the comments there in the side box, and like there's one lady there, Carla, thank you for your comments, by the way. She's popped in there that she's got a regular 30 to 35 day period, so just kind of like tapering off on that kind of that cycle visual there that we've just kind of run through, and I think this is why it's so relevant for us to explain exactly what it is that we want to help support females and athletes, active females, coaches, to actually implement for the females and for yourself, so you've got that understanding and the empowerment to be able to adapt and change your training cycles and your and listen to your body more effectively, so that you have the confidence to be able to alter it up to get the most from it. And so for us to kind of make a presumption that everybody is like this blanket approach of functioning of this 28-day cycle, which is a hell of a lot of information out there that's coming out at the moment that suggests that during this phase you must taper your training this way, you must increase it like this. And actually what we're here to say is that we understand that everybody is different and it's not a blanket approach. That is flawed. It's really flawed in that approach. So what we'd like to be able to help you and your potentially any of your clients to be able to do is build a flow framework, so that once you have understood and felt things that are happening within your own system and you understand what's happening, then you can fully adapt and make the adjustments that you need to your training to get the best from it. So that's what we're here to do, is like those supportive coaches, is to help you to build that flow framework of your very own, being the unique individual that you are, to be able to use generic programming to adapt that. Would you want to add anything to that, Ledge?
I just feel that off the back of, thanks for that, by the way, it was awesome. It's quite interesting because what I always hear, or what discussions come up with myself and with other clients or coaches, is, well, if I just do 2 intense weeks here and then I do 2 not so intense weeks here, I drop the frequency and the volume, are they going to be able to make progress? Are they going to be able to like be healthy? All of those things that we have been discussing throughout this webinar today. And again, back to that approach that everyone is individualized. And for me to turn around, or myself and Hannah to turn around and say that, yes, you do 2 weeks hard and you do 2 weeks easy, that's not what we are saying at all, or not what we are suggesting. There are ways that you can still power up in your flow down if you implement the correct training, nutrition, recovery, especially recovery. And that's something we're here to do as well, is to make recovery great again, especially for females, because our parasympathetic state is not as strong as a male's. And that's something that, again, from a female's kind of brain, and what we have been led to believe, that more is better. Go hard or go home, that kind of approach. And to live that way, to power up throughout a 4-week period, is not okay. Periodization as well, which has been male researched, applied and generalized across the females, suggests like a 3-week on, a 1-week deload. Those deload weeks might fall in that stage of your cycle where you are actually ready to power up and gain progress, because estrogen is anabolic. Okay, so that's just a few little pointers that I wanted to just flow in there that you can maybe digest a little bit. I've just had another question come through, but Hannah, what's your thoughts? Do you want to pick up on anything?
I'm literally just reading some of these comments here.
Yeah, so Shan, I think this is a good one. So Shan has said, please can you touch on the training types we should favor in each phase? For example, max, lifts, etc. I'm happy enough to just tap into that and suggest that in your power up phase, because estrogen is anabolic, as you approach ovulation, testosterone also starts to surge. That's when our body is at its strongest point. So that is when we would recommend females to, for example, go for a 1-rep max lift, because the body is supported anabolically by the hormone estrogen. Okay. However, there is plenty of research out there that also identifies that around that time of the month, ovulation, the body is more lax. The tendons are more lax in the body. Okay, due to relaxin. Okay, due to the hormone relaxin. This is something that females will experience more so during pregnancy. But it's one of those hormones that we need to be aware of also, because if the tendons are more lax and we express more explosive based movements around this time of our cycle without an actual foundation of where our body, our tendons are strong enough to support the joints, to support the body, well then tears, injuries are more likely to occur. So things like that need to be considered. Yeah, you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a point there as well about the kind of the ovulation side of things, because it kind of goes back into like that individualized approach. So Sian, if say you were somebody who felt like amazing around ovulation, and you felt like, based off of the tracking that you've done, you felt like your body was responding really well, and you felt like you were really firing off all cylinders and you felt hungry for your training, like being aware of the types of training that you're doing at that time as well, like Laura said, and just adapting things, but also understanding that not every female feels like that surge, and some females around ovulation can feel quite flat. So listening to your waves there and understanding that if you aren't getting that kind of feedback, then potentially it's worth going back to the drawing board and trying to understand why. Sorry, it's just wanted to add that little point in, the ovulation bit that you were talking about before you kind of go into the flow down phase.
Yeah, I think it's worth also something myself and Hannah have also researched, and I know Hannah's actively practicing this and has been for quite a few years now, which is a 2-to-1 kind of format with your training. And basically what that provides the body with is more recovery. And this element of recovery is something that we suppress because we feel like if we recover more, we're not going to make the progress, we're not going to make further progress, or we're going to retract from the progress that we've already made. So those elements also need to be taken into consideration. And why are you thinking that way? Why do you think that way? Like, you got to stop and ask these questions, because there's so much feedback from those little subclinical symptoms, even from a psychological perspective, that can give you so much feedback. If you're willing to, it was a question I asked a client 2 weeks ago. She was like, I want to gain like 1% more in my performance potential. And I was asking her, well, what is something you have yet to actually submerge yourself in for an extensive period of time to actually know if it works for you? And the one thing that she came back, she has tried every nutrition protocol, training program, all of these things. And the one thing that she has not been comfortable with is recovering, is taking more time off. And when we take more time off, we need to be aware that it helps the body rejuvenate, revive that central nervous system, like Hannah said about that hunger, that like when you think about your Olympic weightlifting sessions, like sometimes you have those moments where you're so fucking snappy, fast under the bar, all of those things. This can deteriorate over time within your cycle, yes, but if you've gone too far and not recovered enough, it is something that can consistently happen, and you're not therefore going to make further progress, adding more weight to the bar, all of these things, because that CNS system from a brain and body perspective is not linking up.
I think as well, like just tapping into that, like the recovery side of stuff, like if we actually understand and we go back to the research that we understand or that's pushed out into the industry now, and actually when we apply that to the female physiology, why that should be different. And it's because the recovery window is shorter for females. So when you're looking at how men recover, and you're looking at like that 3-day on, 1-day off application, or you might go through a training block in your periodization and train for a certain amount of time and then rest. Well, men have an 18 to 21 hour recovery period, whereas females, it's very different. It's, you know, you have within that 30 to 45 minutes where ideally you want to be getting good recovery in the form of nutrition in, but from a recovery perspective, from day-to-day training, it's going to be a hell of a lot longer. We need like 21 to like 35 hours between our training sessions to be able to fully adapt and utilize or get the best adaptation from the training that we're doing. So when Laura tapped in there to like the 2 days on, 1 day off, and how the findings that I found from that, and applying that with Olympic weightlifters at the moment, it's actually quite staggering how much more recovered the female physiology seems to be presenting itself, and the fact that you're going to get that I want to go back and train because I feel recovered. But yet there's so many you know, strength and conditioning kind of, and only because that's the only information that's been out there to kind of support the practices that have been built. But now, like, we're understanding that the research that's come out suggests that those things that are in the manuals and the S&C kind of structured way of working things potentially is actually hindering female potential. So yeah, like the recovery side of things is very, very different, and it's just playing around with that within what you do and seeing how you feel as a result of that. But the other thing I just wanted to kind of tap into there, because I saw some questions about it, was the HA side of things. So if anyone's not entirely sure what HA is, it's something called hypothalamic amenorrhea. Both myself and Laura have got a very close understanding of what that actually means and how that feels. And I think that's important to understand as well, that like we're empathetic in our approach because we're females feeling this in our body as well. So it says here that Anna was just asking, someone suffering from hypothalamic amenorrhea, all of the advice from medical professionals is generally to stop training altogether, along with ensuring nutrition is optimal. Surely this can't be the only way. I accept a drop in intensity, but zero exercise seems counterproductive to health as well. And I think what we have to remember here is that if you have gotten to that point where your periods have stopped and it's asking yourself those questions like what's important to you, like long term, when you look at the risks of hypothalamic amenorrhea, it's not just the fact that you've got impaired fertility, it's the fact, the very, very real fact that you're putting yourself at risk of brittle bones and heart disease that can arise from that lack of estrogen that's cycling around your body. So again, we kind of tend to focus on that short term, like the tangible outcomes, forgetting the things that we can't see. But essentially, you're not going to be able to perform, feel at your best, and get those hormones working the way that they should if we're just doing the same things that we always have. Peak bone strength for females occurs at around the age of 30. So if we're not considering and looking after our recovery and thinking about how we can recover from hypothalamic amenorrhea, then that's going to have an impact all the way through the rest of our hormonal lifespan as well. So,
Legend, sorry, this is an important question that's been brought up again. Steve's giving me a little nudge as well. I want to, just from Carla's question, which was the finally functioning regular 30 to 35 day period. I know we've already addressed this, but just to maybe dive into it a little bit more often than not, deload week comes around my ovulation, which is when I feel most powerful. Then when my period is usually full on training on schedule, but I don't have as much physical or mental power to get everything done. How would you suggest I go about adjusting my training to my period when the deload is off? I don't think she feels like the question has been fully answered.
Do you want me to jump in?
I'm just reading.
Yeah.
So I mean, we've spoke. Information we put out to the guys on the program for the last few years is how to just adjust training. We usually talk about it in terms of how to reduce volume if you've had a stressful day, you've had a bad night's sleep, or you've got a lot going on, like how to reduce volume of training and intensity so that you can manage that. And then training isn't an added stress that's just going to be detrimental to your health and performance. Mm-hmm. What we probably don't usually talk about that much is how can you ramp up training when it's deload. And I think it comes back to Carla to try and answer your question, and please send a message if it's not fully answered. Is that once you understand where you're at in your phase and when you've ovulated and when you've started your cycle, if the deload week, so generally we put a deload week in every 6th week, so it's like 5 working weeks, and then at the 6th week's the deload. If that deload, which we put in for everyone, is in the time of your period where you feel like you're the most powerful, then you can either use what we've put in previous weeks where you've had to drop down the training volume because you've not been in that phase. So if you've identified where your ovulation is and where you've had to drop the intensity and the volume down, then when you come to the deload, revisit that week where it was higher than what you did, and then do that training so that you are making the most of that powerful phase that you're in. But you've got to make sure that when you weren't when you're in the flow down, the girls call it, phase, you have to make sure that you are flowing down, and it's not just going, you're not going hard and heavy then, and then coming down to your deload week and struggling through that hard and heavy, and then getting to the deload week, and then going hard and heavy because you feel good too. Like, you've got to make sure that if you're going hard and heavy when you feel like you're ready to, you've got to make sure that you're also going chilled out, and we'll tell you what to do in that next phase. You're chilling out and you're stripping things back, you're dropping the volume and intensity when your body's also asking you to do that. I think it's something that I think men struggle with as well, is just that the acceptance that sometimes you have to just step back and take the foot off the gas in order to be able to go hard again. I think that's, women have more hormones which bring those feelings and those reasons to the surface, but I think that's something that a lot of people have to get to grips with first.
Yeah, I think that's a really cool point to bring up as well. And I'd suggest that alongside the tracking of the cycle, not just kind of saying, when am I on my period, but actually, what is it that you're experiencing across the whole cycle in terms of energy fluctuations? Because that can look very, very different. So for example, Carla, you were kind of feeling really powerful for say 3 days, but you went in and then you kind of started to get a little bit, didn't feel like you're recovering as well. It's like playing around with the programming that you have to suit your body to best effect. So I think that's what Steve's trying to get at, is that, but our best suggestion there would just be to look for those energy fluctuations alongside when you're actually tracking your cycle as well, so that you're more prepared going forward, knowing when you can change those days up and better get it to better suit your system. Does that kind of cover the question? I think so.
Yeah, I just want to jump in there because like you said, you could be deloaded on a week where you feel powerful, and that's loss of performance potential in essence, where you're kind of tapping into maybe intensity when the body is in more catabolic state. But as myself and Hannah have previously explained, that yes, the body's in a catabolic state, but that doesn't mean to say you can't tap into intensity if your nutrition is more finely tuned to the stage of the cycle that you're at. So we haven't tapped into this deeply yet, because again, this is quite an extensive topic to talk about and discuss, hence why we try to simplify things as much as possible. But from a nutrition perspective, just to give you all a little heads up, that a female in her catabolic state requires more food to build the body back up. So are you onboarding or unloading enough nutrition to support your physiology in your luteal phase to allow you to maybe tap into a bit more intensity then? Or are you across your full cycle just taking on board the same micro breakdown without any change at all? Because if you're not changing anything, well, then your energy levels aren't going to change either. And your body, because we cannot get away from the fact that it's catabolic in nature, because in essence, that's what progesterone is. But we can intervene with support systems, simple wave support systems that will allow you to feel more energy in that stage, to be able to power up in your flow down.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
There's one question that just maybe we could just wrap up for today on, because I know that it's nearly 8 o'clock. We could chat about this forever, couldn't we? Someone having very irregular periods, how would you suggest tracking ovulation and adjusting training through the cycle? So first of all, I'd be asking what is very irregular periods and what does that mean to you? If you've got no idea when that's going to happen, then I would definitely suggest kind of speaking to a medical professional, because what's irregular for one person is not what's irregular for another. So I would definitely say, is that irregular in terms of you're never sure when that's going to happen? And how would you suggest tracking ovulation and adjusting training through the cycle? So talking about ovulation being your gold standard, if that's something that you feel you want to do or suggest to your clients to go and do, is there's very simple ways of tracking to see if you are ovulating by simply buying ovulation sticks or basal body temperature thermometers, so that you can understand when that's happening, and suggesting when, if you've been tracking your cycle, say it's coming every 28 days, for example, you track 3 days before you think it's going to happen and 6 days after. So if it's not happened within that 3-day period, keep tracking to see if it happens later on into the cycle. So that's what I would suggest in terms of like tracking ovulation. In terms of adjusting your training through your cycle, I would say the first port of call is to understand why your periods are irregular in the first place, and if at all ovulation is happening, because you can't blanket approach or adapt your training to get best effect if your periods are irregular and you don't know if ovulation is happening as a female.
True.
All right, Ledge. Is there anything else that anybody kind of wants to ask? Steve, like, what is your thoughts on everything? And just like from a male coach perspective, do you feel like you've seen or heard how training can impact females in different ways to males? And like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, before answering that last question there, the goal for me is obviously, you know, a lot of the girls that are tuned in and the guys that are tuned in are on the competition programs where the program is just written and people follow today on today's, and you know, the intensity and the volume. Although you can adjust it and reduce pretty much a third of it most of the time. You know, it doesn't take into consideration each individual girl's ovulation. That's something that I'm very keen on kind of coming up with something, whether it's just keep going and educating and giving information to the girls, or having something integrated into the program which can help girls make the right decision with their training depending on where they're at. So suggestions with the girls are, and you guys, that you and Laura, I'm open to hear them. In terms of my experience, yeah, there's been times I'd probably say, you know, coaching girls over the last 6 or 7 years, where I find it more often than not, I'll be coaching a girl or I'll be watching her compete or, you know, do a workout, and I'll think, fucking hell, where she just pulled that out of the drawer from, like, just come out of nowhere and like smash this huge weight and also gone super fast in a workout. And then also at certain times being like, you know, before I understood any of this, being like, what the frig's up with her today? Like, you know, why is she not pulling away? And like, you know, is she just being lazy or something else going on outside the gym? And it's just like, I don't think, well, there definitely hasn't been until I met Laura and she educated me. There just isn't that knowledge. You know, I went to university, I studied a degree in sports coaching, sports science, and done many of other qualifications after that. And it's just not once has it been brought up, which is I mean, it's frustrating, no doubt, for the females. But I also don't think girls are linking the two things together. They just see training and what they're going to do in training and what they want to achieve in performance, and then then in another world they think, oh, I've not had my period, but they're not putting those two things together and linking them and seeing that training affects your period affects your training. And like, since working with you know, the majority of my females now and integrating, you know, what you girls were just talking about, there's less of the situations where girls are surprising me with being able to like lift this stupid weight just randomly, or they're not feeling great because I understand that why they're being able to lift more than what they have done in the last 2 weeks, or why they're not, you know, why they're tired, why they're feeling more sore than usual at this phase. And that, as a coach, for me, that helps me get the most out of them. And there's less of those moments as a coach where you're thinking, what the flipping heck's is going on? So yeah, that's, if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, thank you. I just wanted to say, like, thank you so much as well, because this has been like such an awesome opportunity, and I know like myself and Laura are like really grateful to kind of be able to share the awareness and like spread our message and how it is that we can help. And like, I think in answer to your question, Steve, like, if there is people out there thinking, well, I've really got no idea, and like, how do I support this? I want to stay on like this programming, but I'm not sure how to adjust it still. We're actually about to drop systems that will show you how to kind of know your body, align what you're doing with your training, and like flow through your training, but in a supportive way to better support your female physiology and get the most out of the actual programming that you're doing as well. So it's in the pipeline.
It's in essence what Steve actually just brought to the surface there, which is you will actually start to align your cycle with your training. So you're not look at it as something separate. You look at it as like we call it like an ergogenic aid. It's something that's going to benefit your training, and it's something that needs to be taken into consideration first and foremost from a health perspective, because you cannot develop as an athlete if you're not healthy. So health is first and foremost, but we always want the next best thing, or the instant body composition or gratification side of things. And it's from a health perspective, long-term game, that's definitely not the way to look at things.
Yeah, like bottom line, I think the whole message is like female athletes or coaches with female athletes, help yourself or the people around you to support their reproductive and endocrine systems, because that's where the true power is hiding. Like if that's not being supported, like we said, like the performance levels and body compositions and everything that comes along with that is not going to be at its peak. So yeah, thank you so much. And also, if there are any other questions that people do have, like feel free to reach out.
Yeah,
or
I think there's a question.
Someone asked actually, about menopause and training.
That's one, yeah.
That's actually a great question. And the reason it's such a great question is because if we go back to the hormonal life cycle span and we look at what we give you in visual context, the reproductive years, the menarche, the reproductive years, pre, peri, post menopause, the wave fluctuations that occur across that cycle as you get to pre, post, and then menopause, you start to notice that those waves start to decline and deteriorate, and that means that your body becomes more flatlined in state. So you're not getting these surges of anabolic hormone or catabolic hormone. Your body is just pretty much flatlined. But what you can do, again, and this is just pretty a simple overview, what someone in their menopause stage can do is alter their nutrition, alter their training intensity. And this is something that myself and Hannah have discussed in other webinars before, which is a lot of people suggest or think that women in menopause can't do intensity. Well, actually, intensity creates an anabolic state in the body if the individual is healthy enough to adapt to that intensity. So it's a very interesting conversation. We could do probably a full webinar on menopause and perimenopause, but just to let you know that during that phase that women, yes, their hormones are flatlined. It doesn't mean to say that they can't make progress. They can. They just have to intervene with everything else from lifestyle, nutrition, recovery, all of those elements we always discuss. They can't do what they did in their reproductive years and get the same results. It doesn't work that way anymore. I'll give you an example. Protein intake should massively increase. Carbohydrate intake from a simple carbohydrate element should be reduced, but complex carbs increase because we become more hypersensitized to more refined sugars, because we now don't have estrogen and progesterone that help us actually balance that insulin. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, like during that kind of perimenopausal phase, like when you try and think about the fact that you're losing that, like you said, anabolic stimulus, like what can we do to help build the body up? So from the training perspective and a nutrition perspective, like you said, it's trying to recreate or give the body the best chance to get that anabolic stimulus from what we're doing, because it's already going to be struggling within that kind of it's all more like a flow down phase, across the board. So we kind of got it from a protein perspective as well. Just like one little kind of tip on this one, women and the kind of protein and how much protein they're taking on board is really particularly critical in terms of why that might be, because there's something in protein called leucine, and we need that as females. That message is for the muscle protein synthesis to happen. We need that message from the leucine intake to our brain to then allow the muscle protein synthesis to happen within the muscle, whereas for males that happens directly in the muscle. So it's really important, especially in that perimenopausal phase, that we're thinking about that increase in protein and the types of protein that we're taking on board. But certainly it's something that females should be thinking about anyway.
Because I know whey protein has the highest concentrates of bioavailability of leucine, which will get to that brain quicker and obviously stimulate the muscle protein synthesis a lot more effectively. I know there's a lot of women out there who suffer from digestive issues, so whey protein may not exactly suit their digestive system. But my question is, why is your digestive system in a state of inflammation? Is it as a byproduct of other elements within your lifestyle or training that is creating this stress response, inflammatory response, that's not allowing the body to actually metabolize that leucine effectively and efficiently? Because unless it's something that is stemmed from younger years, it's quite interesting that we, from reducing things within our diet and eliminating things within our diet, we can naturally ourselves create intolerances. And it's different if it's an actual, what's the word I'm looking for? If you're actually allergic to something, that's different. But you have the ability to build intolerances as a result of, again, lack of education surrounding nutrition. So yeah, and that again relates to all stages of our hormonal life cycle. From a female physiology perspective, things from a nutrition perspective must shift to allow you to sail through your life rather than struggle. And the majority of women that we come in contact with at the moment are struggling big time.
Yeah, it's sad.
It's not okay.
It's not okay. We actually, like, that low energy availability kind of side of things from a nutrition perspective is actually something that we cover a little bit more about within our WAVE flow school for complete performance. But we also have an ebook which kind of downloads a little bit more in depth about what we discussed today. So go on, have a look on there. And like I said, if you've got any questions that you think about off the back of this webinar today, then feel free to kind of ping them over to Steve or reach out to us on the platform, because we love to hear from you. So yeah. Thank you.
There's I think a bunch of questions came through at the same time. I was just going through, make sure they're all covered. Adele had messaged back and saying that she stopped using the pill 3 years ago, started to track her cycles, thermometer and different apps. It's great because she knows when to push and when to hold off, but the only thing is she gets terrible cramps and has to take painkillers through the day.
This is a really cool one, actually. Like,
yeah,
this,
the pill did, yeah. And then so basically any tips in terms of nutrition and foods that might help reduce the pain, or like what foods could make the pain worse? I know it can be quite specific to each girl, but is there any general kind of like rules of food groups?
What's going on internally in terms of what's happening? And we know that from an inflammation perspective within our, especially if we're thinking about training, if we're not reducing, especially if we're going into that pre-period week, so your like flow down phase, just first of all I would say think about how we can start reducing inflammation and foods that could help support that. So anti-inflammatory foods, I would always suggest first and foremost going for natural sources of food over like supplementation. But you know, like there's things that Laura and I discuss quite regularly about this kind of nutrition stuff, and like how to support that the inflammatory response that's going on in your body. So I would say things like turmeric, if you can get any kind of those things into your system. Like there's loads of like herbal kind of adaptogens and things like this which we can start adding in, worth having a read up on. But I would just say that above and beyond anything else, it's like thinking about those kind of whole food sources that are going to be
one thing I'm just going to take off the back of that I would suggest from a supplementation standpoint, because yes, we don't often recommend supplements unless it's like a last resort kind of thing. Obviously quality food, natural foods is always the way forward, but we got to be aware that magnesium for women, I would highly advise women to take on board magnesium, whether it be like you can get, I know Hannah, you use one, don't you? It's like a soak and it absorbs through the skin. The reason being is that our body uses up so much magnesium to menstruate, to bring that uterus lining for us to actually bleed. So we can't necessarily always get the correct amount of magnesium that we actually need in our systems for the magnesium benefits. So to create that, to soothe that central nervous system. So be mindful that before your period actually happens, before you bleed, you're naturally in an inflammatory state. Magnesium is way more deficient than what it was. So I would recommend, yes, eat more magnesium foods, but also uptake from a supplement standpoint, magnesium, something I do recommend.
Things like omega-3s as well, like just anti-inflammatory, anything that you can, not necessarily from the supplementation side of things, but just going back to the simple basics and just like really looking at what's going on in that pre-period week, because your period's going to be a signal or almost like a story of what's happened in the 4 to 6 weeks previous to it. So whether you've kind of adapted your training efficiently, as to whether you're going to be experiencing like higher pain because your body's trying to give you a signal that something's happened earlier on in the month that's it triggered it to feel that way. So always go back and have a look what's been going on the 4 weeks previous to it as well.
Girls, could you put that that diagram back up? The you know, where you had the menarche and then the
a little hormonal lifespan one.
Yeah, the first one I think it was that you put up. I think this might help Anna's question, which was just after Adele's. Yeah, this one there. How, in fact, yeah. So between the I don't know if you can see. Can you see my cursor or not? No, I don't think you can.
Yeah, I can see that
the menarche phase and then the next kind of arrow line that you've got. So that represents just, you know, where most girls will be going between. I can't see everyone's age, but I presume most girls are going between that phase there. And that represents, if you go on to the next slide, that up and down that you can see, which is constantly going up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. If you go on to that next slide that you had.
Yeah, so through our reproductive years, that cyclical line, the one that you see going up in quite a uniform pattern.
Yeah.
So between the menarche and the perimenopause, so
yeah.
that is where you'll see like the cyclical nature of the monthly cycle happening. If you have
this one.
Yeah. So
yeah.
if
so
you
the up down there represents that the up down. You see where the just above where the word is where the word estrogen is, where you see that yellow line gets to its top point.
No, that do you know that actually represents the whole cycle.
Right.
So,
okay.
So that this is broken down into like one's whole cycle across a month, but how we've represented it on the hormonal lifespan, each peak is a period, so to speak, and then you would fluctuate like that. So you'd keep getting these regular cycles of your period across your reproductive years. Does that make sense?
I think, yeah, it's like from my turn, like how I view it is that these lines should be your natural cyclic rhythm where your hormones are catabolic and like you've got what? Anabolic, catabolic, anabolic, catabolic.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a nice wave, right? So right, that's the way your reproductive years should be. But then like, I'm not even going to say should be, every individual is going to experience different fluctuations for many different reasons. But from a textbook per se, anabolic and catabolic, that's when it's going to look like. Build the body up, break the body down, build the body up, break the body down. If you intervene with the likes of hormonal contraceptives, if you do suffer from a menstrual dysfunction, all of these things will muddy that wave. It will not look like that. It may look more like this wave, or something that may be lower here, and probably lower across the reproductive years. If you've got hormonal contraceptive or hypothalamic amenorrhea, which is what myself and Hannah suffered from, I suffered from it for about 2 years. All I can explain is that it is probably like here, your hormones are completely flatlined.
Mm.
And that's quite a scary place to be, when in your reproductive years, you're meant to be experiencing all these fluctuations. It's quite interesting actually to tap into, just really quickly. I don't know if you've watched the Athlete A documentary, and they discuss about the gymnasts looking quite, they have one kind of look on their face. They never look like they have any emotion at all. A lot of those young developmental gymnasts suffer from hypothalamic amenorrhea and menstrual dysfunctions. So when we know our hormones create dopamine, motivation, pleasure, create serotonins, happy feelings, all those things, well, of course, if they're not getting that feedback, they're not going to have any emotion to express. So it's all these things that, again, from an education perspective, and why we want to educate it is, rather than the application right now, is because we first need to understand what and why it's happening, why we are experiencing low energy dips, why. Keep asking why, and why is my thought process this way? And a lot of it is unintentional, because we've never been educated what we now are being educated. Sorry to go off on one, but that's how I flow over here. So yeah, like, I hope, is there anything else, Steve?
There's one more. Sam asked me, this is going to sound like a weird question, but I was told not to do handstands during my period. It's not good for you. Is this true?
I think it's one of those like period myths.
Yeah. I've heard that before in like some yoga teachers will practice that and not allow you to go upside down. Other yoga teachers have a completely different.
There's never a stupid question to ask, and I feel like this is that's like actually a really good one to end on, because I think there's so many like females and males out there that are like scared to like ask the questions, because it's not easy to find this information. And like, always ask the question, and always just put yourself out there, because it's asking those things that you think are silly, which actually probably answers someone else's question that sat there and doesn't want to say it.
Yeah. Could you put the because I think it's really important, and I don't know, I just want to make sure that the girls understand it. Could you put that power up and flow down slide back on?
Yeah. Where is it? Here we go. Can you see it? Hold on.
Anna says, I questioned why with a male yoga teacher once. I think he felt slightly uncomfortable. I can't. For some reason, it's gone blank screen. Try it again.
Oh, has it? Oh, hold on.
I'm showing it again. Yeah, it's
there.
There it is.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
So, like, we talk about like the power up and the flow down. We talk about, like we said, they're almost like our little they're little like our catchphrases, but it actually helps you to really apply those things.
Yeah, as soon as you called it that, it made way more sense to me than follicular and luteal. Like, I confused those two words too many times.
It's too silent,
and flow down. It just makes it simple, and my brain works in a simple way.
Yeah, like like we're just trying to make it more accessible for everybody to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the power up phase, that's going to be the phase where, you know, they can push the weights, they can push the intensity, based, like, let's say that, you know, we've got a healthy cycle going on, and, you know, they can make the most out of the training. That's where they're going to feel the best out of the training. And then that flow down phase, and I think this is important. One big thing I learned from you girls is how nutrition can also help that phase. That flow down phase, it doesn't mean that you have to stop training, so to speak. It's just the focus changes. The focus is no longer heavy weights and hard workouts, or, you know, intensity. that can be those 2 weeks. You can fill those 2 weeks like, you know, learning the skills as in like gymnastic skills and weightlifting technique is what holds most people back in training anyway. Like, you look at the difference between the best athletes in the world, you look at Tia and Matt Fraser, and you look at someone who competes at renal trials, the main difference is the skill set and how much more skillful that athlete is who's at the top level. I know that's quite a big kind of like range from best in the world to renal, but the difference between a person's placement in the open isn't how heavy they can lift and how hard they go. It's their skill set. It's how good they move, how well they move, the range of the skill set that they have. And that's something that you can just be fully working on, you know, working on skill, working on your technique and, you know, different elements of the skill isn't going to take loads out of you as an athlete, because a lot of it is just the mind to muscle connection of learning how to do something.
Like, still gonna
Like
get
that's something that, like, although it's flow down, I think girls might be like, oh, that's 2 weeks where I can't get better, but you can get better. And if you up your skill level and get yourself to a point where the next time in 2 weeks' time, if you can get 2 or 3 sessions in that are focused on, let's say, a ring muscle up technique, when it comes around to your power up phase, when you're feeling great and strong and powerful, and you've gone off the back of 3 sessions where you're working on your ring muscle up skills, you're more likely to be able to do ring muscle ups even better when you get to that phase in the power up phase. And that's just one example of many of how you can just switch the focus of like your mental focus to that session based off the phase, your menstrual phase and your cycle that you're in. Yeah, I mean, that's something that one of the main things that I've gathered. And I know, Laura, you'd mentioned to me that the flow down phase is also where you can, your body is able to work a little bit better aerobically. And in that phase where your body actually needs more fats to support the hormones, and if fat is actually the fuel for aerobic exercise, so it just ties in together. If you're in that luteal phase, your fats are raised to support the hormones, and your fats are also raised. The fact that your fats are also raised means that you can function aerobically a lot more efficiently as well. So then you just made some aerobic improvements in your flow down phase. So it's not all like lost in that 2 weeks. I feel like that can sometimes be the presumption. There's a lot of stuff that can still develop you as an athlete, as long as, like you say, you're working with your body and you're not trying to do what you need to do in power up phase while you're in flow down.
I just wanted to pop in there just off the back of something you said, like from the nutrition perspective. Yeah. I just want to definitely clear up, this is something that has been flowing around within you utilize fats better in the stage, so therefore you don't eat carbohydrates. That's a load of bullshit. And the reason being is that when we tap into high intensity training, our body needs glucose, our brain needs glucose anyway on a daily basis to function efficiently. Glucose comes from carbohydrates. Yes, our body may be tapped out at utilizing carbohydrates for fuel, but that doesn't mean to say that when we go into a training session, we can't intervene with carbohydrates to actually utilize them there and then within a training perspective. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it makes, yeah. Sorry, I was
just that a lot of people would think, oh, I just eat carbohydrates in my first 2 weeks and I just eat fats in my second 2 weeks. Again, likewise, power up and flow down. That's not how it works, because we don't want them. We don't suggest and recommend our females to now go and not eat carbohydrates. Something we actually massively encourage. We encourage power eating all the fucking way.
Yeah. So I meant there's a rise in fats that you take in from flow down, isn't there? It's not like you don't stop.
Your body will better utilize them. It will better metabolize them.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean to say that carbohydrates can also be used as a performance gain when you intervene with it during training, because the uptake is going to be better. It's going to be more efficient during training.
Yeah.
Wilson?
Yeah.
Anything?
I was just listening to kind of the feedback, but I think like
I just want to ask a question, Hannah. What was your thoughts on what Steve just said in relation to the power up and flow down?
What and how it's understood?
Yeah, and how it's understood. Yeah.
I think that it's, you know, like the whole purpose of us creating something that people can kind of tap into and easily make sense of is awesome. But what we do know is that there's a lot of females and, you know, and coaches trying to do the right thing and trying to help the females, but actually like it's this blanket approach effect, which we know actually can be more harmful than helpful. And I think we always have to go back and remember that. And I know that we've like banged on about it so much, but it really does make all the difference for the individual if they are actually understanding that and creating their own flow framework to be able to take back to their training. So yes, it's awesome, like that we understand what power up and flow down is and how that relates to each phase and what's happening underneath the surface. But we know that there's a hell of a lot of females out there that don't have like healthy functioning menstrual cycles. So we've really got to go back to the drawing board and understand what's going on before we can start to go, oh yeah, I know how to power up and flow down and apply that to my training, because it might not actually be happening under the surface.
Yeah, that was that same thought process where it was, again, back to why are we always so quick to want the application? Let's be a little bit sharper on asking for the education. And once we gain that understanding, we have a whole, like, you've got a better chance to remain in the sport for a longer period of time. You have a better chance to perform at a higher level. You have a better chance to be healthier, both psychologically and physically. And this it doesn't come from the application, it comes from first understanding. Hence why we have built our models initially around the education. Now we'll be revealing application package. However, we do feel that the education aspect is still not yet fully understood or taken on board. But it's getting there. It's again in its infancy, and it's flowing and growing, and we're really excited about where it's going to go.
Flow feedback comes first, doesn't it, Ledge?
Yeah, 100%.
So I'm sorry, I think someone else can jump in then. No, let's say I'm a lady, and I want to. I'm starting to grasp the understanding, but I want to learn more and educate myself more. And like you said, the education comes first before the application. What services and what are you girls offering that these girls can get in touch with you from? I know you're a flow school, and you said you got some ebooks, but just let the girls know what you have available if they want to take things a little bit further.
That's our little sales pitch, isn't it, Steve?
Set you up there. I've set you up. There you go.
Look at him. Love it.
Do you know, I think that's what we tapped into a little bit before, that Laura and myself, like, we have been busily working away behind the scenes, creating these systems which are going to help the individuals to build their flow framework. So across a 6-week period, we're going to help to educate and further help them to grow their own flow framework, so that whatever programming they're actually undertaking, they have that empowerment and understanding of their own system to be able to make the adaptations for themselves. So yes, that's what we are about to drop. It's taken a little bit of time to get that up and running, but when it does come, it's going to be awesome. From the other, like, education perspective, like, we are really keen to kind of keep doing the flow school side of stuff. Although we've covered an awful lot here, we'd encourage you all to kind of come along, tap in for a session there. Like, you can book it on our website, and the ebook is just a great resource just to go back to and tap into along the way.
So is the flow school just like one-off seminars that they can book on, like groups?
Yeah, at the moment we're working through what we call our wave 1.0, so that in everything that we're doing we work through a wave education system. So at the moment we're spreading awareness, we're helping people to understand what the female system is actually doing under the surface from a hormonal perspective, like we much have done today here. So it's really just about that understanding at wave 1.0 before we surge into our next wave, and we release the application side of things of how do I actually go about changing my training and adapting my nutrition and my recovery to get best effect. So yes, the application is coming, but we want people to understand it first with that education.
Cool.
Boom.
Boom. There's the sales pitch. But honestly, like, these conversations I think are just epic. Like, they mean everything to Lauren and myself, because I think it's just that opportunity to come in and talk to people and build relationships, and essentially that's what our business is built on, and we want to continue to do that, whether or not people buy into a product or not. Like, it's awesome that you're just asking the questions and feeling supported.
Yep, 100%.
I was going to ask something then. Oh yeah, your the education thing. There's something that you said you're about to drop. Can the girls be put on a list to hear about it first?
Yeah, they can.
Anywhere? The message on Instagram.
Yeah, just like drop us a little note. In fact, we'll probably pop up something onto our feed tomorrow, and you like a little list to, what's like a pre-order list. Come get involved. It'd be awesome to have you on board.
Cool. And for any of the guys, obviously we have the chat function on Fitter that you can get in touch with us with. If there's anything else that you want to ask us in terms of how it might relate to training, then I'm more than happy to jump on those questions. Yeah, and like I said, what I should have mentioned at the beginning is we had a similar chat to this, but with all the JST coaches it's probably about a month ago now, actually, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So, you know, there's some guys on here that have got individual coaches as well. They've been brought up to scratch. So if you feel like there's anything you want to chat to with them or with us, then don't feel uncomfortable bringing the situation up, because you know we don't feel uncomfortable. So
this is the whole point. We're like taking that taboo kind of aspect away from all of this, and yeah, initially it might feel uncomfortable, but all the fucking good stuff does feel uncomfortable initially. So please do reach out. It's like Hannah said earlier, like we love like relationship building, collaborating, just talking in general.
Genuinely, like she does. My little fire.
Say that again.
She's my little firecracker.
I said we love relationship building and collaborating and the other.
I'm talking. I know. I know. That's why I said you can say that again.
It's the Irish in me. I can't get rid of that. It's innate.
Irish blonde.
You.
Like,
cool.
I get up and do a little jig for you here, will I?
I'm learning.
Cool.
Yeah,
I think if there's any last questions, you got like 10 seconds to chuck them in. We've gone for a good hour and 40 there.
I was just going to say thank you.
I'm so funny. I'm picking the lunch out of my teeth. I'm always starving.
I'm chewing my glasses.
Really, thanks, like Strength Lab, for saying it was really helpful. It's awesome, and I think if there are like any male coaches or like you know males with like females in their lives and they want to know a little bit more or know how to broach the subject, like that's another thing that we are really keen to discuss.
Actually, like this isn't too training related, but since I've been working with Laura and yourself, Hannah, I understand my wife more now than I ever did. And do you know what? I understand her menstrual cycle better than she understands it. And I say, are you tracking it? No. Right. Well, we can't, you know.
Like, we're all about relationship. Like, so. you know, that's what it comes back to. Like, if we can help to better your relationship with your wife.
But
then everyone's winning.
That's the fucking essence of the whole thing as well. Like, when you better understand yourself, you can better communicate yourself. Of course, your relationships are going to be better.
Yeah.
Like it's a fucking win-win on all levels.
Yeah. And you know what they say? Happy wife, happy life.
True story.
Cool. Right, I'm going to stop.
Thanks, Lucy. Thanks, team.
I'm going to stop the recording there.
Thanks
Guys.
so much. Thanks so much.